Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. I consider in our corner of the internet the fight fans who gather here to be really among the very best online. I view this YouTube community to be the boxing hardcore, right? I've learned a lot listening to comments. Things that I thought were true, I've come to find out aren't, right? That one opinion, my opinion, is simply that, one opinion, that there are many others. Now this Timothy Bradley, Juan Manuel Marquez fight has been an eye-opener for me. Really, it's been kind of like a rolling realization where what I thought was true up front, I'm finding out is not even the consensus in the public, right? I've read a lot of the comments to the video I posted yesterday, the post-fight video, and they're eye-opening. While many people believe that Bradley won the fight, the margin of victory is hotly disputed, right? You have some, like me, who believe it wasn't close, who believe going into the last few rounds, it was obvious that Juan Manuel Marquez needed really multiple knockdowns or a knockout to get back in the fight, right? If you believe Bradley won this fight by 4 rounds, as Patricia Jarman, the judge, did, well, as you're entering the 11th round, you understood that Marquez needed something dramatic just to get back in the fight, just to close the gap, right? Understand, a 4-round margin of victory in a 12-round fight is huge, because what they're telling you is one guy won 8 rounds, the other guy won 4 rounds. Some of my best subscribers, B-Boy Roxas, for example, has said that he thought the fight was a 9-3 round. Harold Letterman on HBO had the fight 117-111. That's a 6-round margin, right? That's 9-3. But understand, there's a different group out there. Ellie Setback has a video up where he actually interviews people leaving the fight. And one guy looks at the camera, and he looks very sincere. And he says, "I don't know where you're from, man. Marquez won that fight." Right? Nacho Beristain, during the fight, is telling Marquez he's winning the fight. Juan Manuel Marquez, who's been in several championship fights after the fight, says, "Hey, I won this fight." Right? And this is a guy who openly admits that he lost the Mayweather fight. Let me talk about some other scoring, right? Because people are all over the page on this. Judge Glenn Feldman, championship judge, he had Marquez winning the fight 115-113. He had Marquez up by 2. Understand, his scorecard seems to have a little bit of credibility because Robert Hoyle, the other judge in the fight, had Bradley winning 115-113, right? The inference is that this fight could have gone either way. Now, I don't expect you to agree with me here. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm just going to talk about what I'm looking for in terms of scoring a fight, right? It might be different than what you're looking for in scoring a fight. But understand, one of the best things about boxing is also one of the worst things about boxing. This is a Charles Dickens sport. It's the best of times and the worst of times. And that is the difference of opinions we have on how to score fights, right? We're all looking for different things. Boxing seems to be even more subjective than ice skating, right? A bet I had many years ago with a good friend where I was watching the fight and I was laughing. I mean, openly laughing as the 12th round unfolded in the fight because I knew my guy had won the fight. It was Lennox Lewis against Evander Holyfield. And let's just say that I'm watching the fight, I was laughing. I knew I had beaten my buddy. At the time, the fight was viewed as close. In the middle of that last round, Lennox Lewis actually raises his hand and waves at the crowd. And there was a British group in the crowd. They cheered him. If you were a Lewis guy, this was a victory lap during the fight. Then, of course, the scoring came back and they called that fight a draw. And I was discussing the fight with a friend later. And I said, can you believe they called that fight a draw? And the guy said to me, well, gee, I thought Evander Holyfield won the fight. Right? Well, all I'm saying is that's the sport we're dealing with. So let's talk about some other scorecards. Then I'll talk about scoring. John Chirwa of the LA Times actually scored the fight live. He gave Bradley the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th rounds. He had Bradley winning the fight 116-112. This is the LA Times, right? The reason I'm mentioning is just to say there are those out there who saw it the way I did, who saw it the way Harold Letterman did. Steve Busfeld of The Guardian, right? TheGuardian.com, also had Bradley winning by 4 rounds. Understand that he had Bradley winning the 5th round. He called the 6th round a draw. He had Bradley winning the 7th round. He had Bradley winning the 8th round. He had Bradley winning the 10th round. He had Bradley winning the 12th round. In other words, the conventional wisdom today that Marquez storms back in the latter half of the fight isn't apparent to some of the people scoring the fight, right? As the fight unfolded, Steve Busfeld didn't see this big Marquez comeback. Fight Hype here online. Excellent website, fighthype.com. I recommend it to everyone. They had Bradley winning 116-112. Right? Now keep in mind, they're interesting because they gave the 9th, 10th, and 11th rounds to Marquez. Right? Unlike Steve Busfeld. And they still had Bradley winning by 4 rounds. Right? So let's talk about, with reference to actual fights, at least what I'm looking for when I'm judging a fight. And it's much more than CompuBox, right? You can watch a fight, try to count the punches landed. I think the punches landed tell only part of the story. I also would question the methodology used to count the punches landed because I think the CompuBox numbers for this Marquez-Bradley fight are way off. First criteria, certainly a major criteria that I use in judging a fight, is what I call ring generalship. Right? Now, the best way to consider this is to ask yourself, which fighter has taken away the other fighter's plan A? Right? In other words, you see 2 fighters in the ring. Which fighter has literally defeated the other fighter's primary strategy or has neutralized it? One of the most fascinating first rounds I've seen recently was the Floyd Mayweather Saul Alvarez first round. That's a devastating first round. Doesn't feature a knockdown, but that's an absolutely devastating first round, right? That's what I'm talking about when I say ring generalship. Canelo was viewed as the heavier guy. Not just heavier, but heavier handed. Right? Canelo was supposed to be the guy with the punch. Canelo was the person who was supposed to corner and destroy Floyd Mayweather. Right? The pre-fight hype, the argument, in fact, their histories were such that you thought, okay, Floyd was able to move against Robert Guerrero. He was able to be on his back foot, get out of dodge. The argument for Canelo beating Floyd, if you believe that argument, was that Canelo would catch up with Floyd. Right? That sooner or later, Canelo was going to land some big shots. That Floyd couldn't run for 12 rounds. Right? Floyd certainly was not going to be the one pushing the action, hunting down Canelo. So then round one starts. Floyd Mayweather comes out on his front foot against an undefeated knockout artist who's supposed to be heavier with the heavier punch. Floyd Mayweather comes out hunting him. It's shocking. Right? The idea is, Canelo, you're supposed to be a puncher. Here I am. Let's go. Nacho Beristain has talked about it in an interview. That's the moment of truth in the Floyd Mayweather fight. Folks, it comes in the first minute of the fight. Mayweather comes out on his front foot, is right in Canelo's face, is ready to trade with Canelo. Canelo wasn't ready to trade with him. Canelo looks confused. Canelo looks baffled. Whatever Canelo tries to do, he doesn't do well. Right? Mayweather, literally, from that point forward, in my opinion, had the mental edge in the fight. He had broken Canelo. Right? Just, how do you put it? The way to beat a bully is to hit the bully in the mouth sometimes. Right? Floyd Mayweather on his front foot is there. Right? He's dangling his titles for Canelo to take them. He's challenging Canelo. Canelo didn't meet the challenge. As I watched the rest of the fight, it seemed to be an exercise in Floyd doing whatever he wanted. Right? Later in that fight, Floyd gets on his back foot and he's moving around the ring and he's doing what Floyd does. He's using lateral movement. He's mixing it in with brilliant defense and brilliant counters. Right? But the point is, in terms of who's dictating the action, whether Floyd's being offensive or defensive, it's Floyd Mayweather. Right? Now, even in that fight, Judge C.J. Ross had that fight 114-114. That's the sport of boxing. That's why we're here talking about scoring. Another great round, and I consider it one of the best rounds I've ever seen, is the first round of Muhammad Ali, Sonny Liston, the first fight. Understand the way Sonny Liston got the heavyweight championship. Sonny Liston comes out, destroys Floyd Patterson in the first round both times. Right? Sonny Liston was such a feared puncher that people were wondering how Ali could survive the early rounds. This is a generational break in boxing. Right? Ali comes out and he's dancing around Sonny Liston in the first round. Hardly a punch is thrown. Right? Sonny Liston can't get his feet right the entire round. Right? Ali's dancing and fainting. That's all he does for the first round. Right? He's dancing and fainting. And Big Bad Sonny Liston, who really was a knockout machine, a guy who would come forward and destroy you, at least that's how he was viewed, had no answers. Right? Whose plan A is working? Right? Another great beginning to a fight, and the judges disagreed with me on this. Pernell Whitaker against Oscar De La Hoya. People forget, but in the 1990s, Oscar De La Hoya had one of the most lethal left hands in boxing. De La Hoya was big for his weight. He had what was called a 45. His left hook put people to sleep. One punch, knockout, power. Right? Don't look at De La Hoya today and think he's just a pretty boy promoter. He was one of the very best in boxing, pound for pound, for a stretch of time. And he was a guy who fought everyone. Right? Here's Pernell Whitaker. He comes out. And it's as if Pernell, early in the fight, looks at Oscar and tells him, Oscar, you can't land that left hand against me. As you look at those early rounds, Oscar's not just missing the left hand. Oscar's missing the left hand by wide margins. And understand the way Pernell has him missing the left hand isn't by moving around the ring. Pernell's right in front of him. Pernell has it timed and is bending at the waist. Right? When I see stuff like that, I'm sorry, folks, but I'm giving those rounds to Mayweather, Ali, and Pernell Whitaker. Right? In fact, another fight. This guy lost the fight. I'm not saying he won the fight. Right? Matthew Macklin against Sergio Martinez. I thought that was some brilliant boxing. Right? Macklin normally is a mid-range hooker, likes to be on his front foot, likes to put together hooks in bunches. At least that's what Sergio Martinez thought. So I'm watching the beginning of that fight, and here is Matthew Macklin with Buddy McGirt in his corner. These guys really did a masterful job for as long as it lasted. Macklin ultimately gets knocked out. But Macklin comes out on his back foot. Right? He's not mid-range hooking. He's actually long-range jabbing. Right? And he's rolling with punches. I'm telling you, there's a stretch in that fight where Sergio Martinez looks as confused as I've ever seen him. That fight is much better than the Martin Murray-Sergio Martinez fight that fans seem to like. Right? Here, Martinez was outthought and surprised for several rounds. Matthew Macklin is taking several rounds because Macklin's making Sergio Martinez miss. Martinez isn't able to do anything against him. Macklin's coming in, landing clean counters. He's completely taken Sergio Martinez out of his plan A for a few rounds. Right? Another great fight, Guillermo Rigondeaux against Nino Donaire. Just like Pernell Whitaker before him, Rigondeaux basically tells Donaire, forget about the left hook. That punch you hit Fernando Montiel with, it's not landing tonight. Right? So here is Rigondeaux. Every time Donaire even tries to throw the left hand, Rigondeaux has already rolled out of the picture. Right? For me, again, just like I gave the early rounds of the Martinez fight to Matthew Macklin, I'm giving, rounds to Rigondeaux against Donaire. Right now here, in the Timothy Bradley fight, Bradley's foot speed and pacing completely take Marquez out of his counterpunching game. Bradley's giving him nothing to counter. Understand, let's just think about it in terms of spacing. If I'm going to counterpunch you, in other words, throw a punch after you've thrown a punch, right? If I'm going to counterpunch you, I need for you to be close enough for me to counter, right? One of the ways that fighters use to not be close enough is their jab. In other words, if Timothy Bradley's busting me up with a jab from the outside and he hits me with the jab, he might be too far away for me to counter. If he's throwing combinations from distance, again, he might be too far away for me to counter. And even when I try to counter, I might get hit with the second or third punch of his combination. Also in this fight, and I thought it was interesting, Bradley at times is close. But Bradley makes it such that he's not throwing punches that Marquez can counter. In other words, Marquez is there loaded, ready to throw the right hand. Bradley gives him nothing to counter. Bradley's outthinking him. Then, of course, Bradley on occasion comes in, hits him. Then, just like Rigondeaux, starts rolling immediately. He knows Marquez is going to try to come back with the same right hand Marquez finished Manny Pacquiao with. And Marquez tries to come back with that right hand, and Bradley's bent, Pernell Whitaker style. Right? Bradley's bent and Bradley is rolled, so that right hand either just grazes Bradley without any pop whatsoever, or misses Bradley entirely. Right? In fairness to Marquez, Marquez does land some pretty good uppercuts. But there again, he lands the uppercut, Bradley immediately comes back and counters the uppercut. Right? And so I thought that in this fight, Marquez was taken out of his plan A by Bradley's spacing, speed, both hand speed and foot speed, jab, and strategy. Right? So just hear me out on that. Also, let's talk about rolling with punches. Right? It's not just whether punches are landing, it's where the punches are landing. I prefer watching fights on TV than I do at the arena. At the arena, it happens too fast for me. At the arena, some well-intentioned person is jumping up in front of me and I'm leaning my neck over trying to watch the action, and I don't have a clear view. Right? I don't have the benefit of multi-angles. Granted, today it's a little bit different because now they got big screen TVs. But back in the day, I didn't have the benefit of slow motion replays and multi-angles. My view was only as good as the price I paid for my ticket. Right? So, I actually prefer watching stuff on TV, and it's different on TV because on TV, you actually notice that a punch that looked good either didn't land or landed on the guy's shoulder or landed on the guy's forearm as he rolled away. That a guy actually anticipated the punch and was rolling with it. You see fights involving Bernard Hopkins and Andre Ward, and I'm just here to tell you these guys are constantly rolling, right? Maybe the opponent looks like they're landing on him. They're not, and they're certainly not landing on the guy's temple or the guy's chin. In other words, the chin's tucked, guy's rolling, punch lands on his shoulder. I consider that a defensed punch, right? When I see a guy throwing punches and he never hits the other guy's chin, he's hitting the other guy's shoulder or elbow. To me, that guy's not landing the punch where he wanted to land the punch. That tells me the other guy's defense is actually working. Right? Just read the cuts. You're watching a fight, Sergio Martinez, Kelly Pavlik. You're watching the fight. That fight's interesting because the announcers wanted you to believe that Kelly Pavlik was coming back in the fight. And here is Sergio Martinez looking uncut. Right? Martinez looks like he's just left the locker room. He's looking uncut. And here, whatever the announcers are saying, Kelly Pavlik is bleeding from both eyes. Read the cuts, folks. That'll tell you where the punches are landing. Right? Guys' eyes don't just start bleeding. Guys don't suddenly have a busted, eyebrow and stuff like that without getting hit there. Right? And so you can tell just by reading the cuts who's hitting who where. And so all I'm saying is think about the guys who you hardly ever see cut. Sergio Martinez, Bernard Hopkins, Floyd Mayweather. I'm not saying these guys haven't been cut ever. But all I'm saying is these guys typically are so good defensively that the punches on them don't land on a chin or on a temple. Right? These guys are rarely staggering around the ring. You know what? even though, let's say, Hopkins has been knocked down, most recently by Jean Pascal, I can say that in the entire Bernard Hopkins career, he's never been beaten up like Timothy Bradley was beaten up by Ruslan Provodnikov. Never. Right? Floyd Mayweather, same thing. Right? Neither of these guys knows what it's like to be in the position Manny Pacquiao was in at the end of his last fight against Juan Manuel Marquez. Right? These guys don't even know what it's like to have to recover from a devastating knockout. Hasn't happened to them because they're too good defensively. When I'm watching a fight and I see a guy landing on Floyd Mayweather, and of course, where's he landing? Floyd's shoulder. Right? Floyd's bicep. He's not even landing in the solar plexus or any really good rib shots, right? He's landing on Floyd's defense. Well, to me, again, the defense is working. When I see the defense working, and, a great defensive fighter landing flush and then defensing most of what comes back, I'm going to score the round for the defensive fighter. Right? Not the guy throwing punches on the other guy's shoulder. Because I'm not going to give those the benefit of the doubt the way I would punches landing on a guy's eye, on a guy's temple, on a guy's chin. Right? Also, who's landing the power shots? The power shots beat jabs. Right? Unless you're throwing a Larry Holmes or Carlos Monzon level jab, right? I'm going to go with the guy landing the hard power shots in a close fight. Whose head is snapping back? Who's getting hit with the Sunday punches? Right? So, sometimes CompuBox will show a lot of volume from a jabber. That's not good enough for me. You have to mix in power shots. One of the secrets to Floyd, one of the secrets to Sergio, is that they actually land a high percentage of power shots, right? These guys don't jab you to death. They'll land, and it's power shots landing in addition to the jabs, right? Finally, who's controlling the pacing? Now, this is something many fighters have forgotten. If you're a Marvin Hagler fan, and you have a beef with the Leonard Hagler decision, this is one of the primary grounds for the beef. A round is 3 minutes long. If we're going to be honest, we've got to score the round based on what happened the entire 3 minutes. A Ray Leonard or an Ali doing a flurry in the last 15 seconds of a round shouldn't be enough to negate the first 2 minutes and 45 seconds. Right? These guys know how long rounds are. They have accomplices sitting ringside in their corner. Right? Trainers and guys like, Brudini Brown and stuff like that. So these guys can motion to the fighter when the round's in the last 3 minutes. In my opinion, judges shouldn't be fooled by last-minute flurries. Also, in my opinion, when I'm watching a guy who clearly has stamina problems, some of the biggest names in boxing, Saul Alvarez in my opinion, and the guy's taking off 90 seconds of every 3 minutes, that matters to me. If I see an opponent dominate you for 90 seconds, half a round, then you throw a couple of flurries in the last 90 while that opponent holds his own, I'm sorry, but you've lost the round. Episodic fighters shouldn't be given credit for 3 rounds of action when they're not fighting 3 rounds. Right? And so just keeping those things in mind, understand that when I first saw Bradley Marquez, I didn't think it was close. Right? I believe I gave Marquez the 3rd round out of the first 7 rounds. I thought Bradley was moving too well. I left the fight. And I left it with the conclusion that Bradley would need a knockout or at least knockdowns. Not Bradley, but Marquez would need a knockout or at least knockdowns to get back in the fight. Now, YouTube Nation, a huge portion of you disagree with me, what I hope you do is use the comment section here to discuss the criteria you're looking for in scoring fights, right? I've mentioned some fights that I thought were brilliant where the guy I was backing lost the fight. I still don't know how Pernell Whitaker was not declared the winner of that Oscar De La Hoya fight. It was so shocking. Whitaker took out an ad the next day in the LA Times saying, gee, what happened? Oscar, you lost that fight, right? Well, all I'm saying is, understand my opinion isn't the consensus opinion. It's a minority opinion, right? Obviously, many guys have been able to thrive following different strategies, right? Matthew Macklin didn't beat Sergio Martinez, right, when they fought. But I'll just say this, when I see a first round, like Floyd Mayweather-Canelo, and I see Floyd there on his front foot against a slugger, and that slugger blinks, I know who I'm giving that round to. Let me hear from you. Leave your comments for me here online. Thanks for sticking and hanging in there in this overly long video. Thanks for stopping by.